With the federal government taking its agenda to the world stage, its social media ban for kids, its emissions reduction targets, there's plenty to talk about in politics. And our panel today for this discussion is Labor member for the Sydney seat of Bennelong, Jerome Laxale, and the Liberal member for the Gold Coast-based seat of Fadden, Cameron Caldwell. Thank you both for joining us.
Great to be on.
Thanks, Melissa.
Great. Jerome, I want to start with you and the Prime Minister spruiking the social media ban to other leaders overseas. There's clearly a lot of interest in this issue. It's a bit of a universal one of how to make sure our kids are safe online. Australia's certainly at the forefront, but are we going to be ready by December 10 for this to start?
Yeah, look, you're exactly right. The world is watching, and Australia hosted a special event on the sidelines at the UN. Importantly, this reform is bipartisan, and to have the coalition working with the government to lead the world in this space, I think is something really important for kids. It won't be perfect, but what it will do is it'll set the example that 16-year-olds and under cannot have access to an account on certain social media types. Not having an account means that these companies can't profile the kids. You can't get that algorithmic, like always on video loop, and just set a community standard like we have for, alcohol and tobacco, that being underage and using this is not okay. It's the world's watching, and you heard the EU president say she was inspired by what Australia is doing.
In saying it won't be perfect, are you trying to manage expectations here?
Oh, well, just like current age restrictions for, as I said, tobacco and alcohol are not perfect. We anticipate, and I anticipate, people will find their way through this, but it will give parents, importantly, the opportunity to have these discussions with their kids, just like I have with my kids. The only app they're on is YouTube, and I've said you've got till December 10 before we deactivate everything. It gives it the weight of law. And it changes the conversation for parents and teachers about the importance of being safe online and not getting stuck in these algorithmic loops that some social media platforms have.
There's definitely going to be a lot of household conversations going on. Cameron, this is something that the coalition, has pushed for. It was a big part of Peter Dutton's campaigning when he was leading the Liberal Party. How are you feeling about the details that are going to come into force on December 10? Are you happy with the result that the coalition has had a role in helping bring about?
Yeah, look, and it's fantastic that we received some recognition on the global stage, and it really underlines the importance of this issue. We've seen the terrible damage that's been inflicted on young Australians through social media over recent years, and this is a massive step in the right direction. And Jerome's right that it's wonderful this was ultimately a bipartisan approach and a bipartisan outcome. But as a coalition, we're very proud of the fact that we really dragged the Labor government kicking and screaming to make sure this reform was done. And I look forward to it coming into effect on December 10. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. We need to make sure this works, and it works in the way that we all hope it does.
We're going to hear from one of the companies that's involved in age verification a little bit later on in the program, so we'll hear a bit more detail about that. But I want to focus on some of the other issues that have cropped up over in New York as world leaders are there for the UN, and one of those is climate change. We've got a lot of countries announcing their 2035 targets. Jerome, the federal government's announced its target before heading over there, but we saw China announce its target at the UN General Assembly, 7 to 10% below its peak. What do you make of the contribution of the biggest polluters like China with that sort of target?
Well, this is China's first ever medium-term emissions reduction, 7 to 10% by 2035. That's a huge deal, to have the biggest emitter in the world actually commit to reduction, not a reduction in intensification, but an actual emissions reduction. And I've done some quick numbers just before coming on. In 2023, China emitted 12.6 gigatons, so a 10% cut would be 1.26 gigaton. Our target reduction is about 428 megatons. So their 7 to 10 is like 3 or 4 times bigger than our 67 to 70. What you're seeing is the world really pushing forward on emissions reduction because we just have to. We don't have a choice.
Cameron, you heard Jerome there saying the world is moving. I suppose the exception to that is the US. We heard Donald Trump give a speech saying climate's a con job. Is he right?
Well, look, firstly, just on the China emissions reduction target, I think the Prime Minister would probably actually be quite disappointed that China didn't back this in a more ambitious way. And what it shows is that each country will get there their own way. And you don't necessarily need to break the economy on the way through. The Chinese Premier was very clear in saying that there's a direction of travel, but they set some targets that I think they felt were achievable for their country. The United States, again, has their own approach to this, and I think we just need to bear in mind that everyone is in a direction of travel. They'll probably get there differently. They'll probably get there at different times.
Is the US really
is
the US really in the same direction of travel when it's pulling out of the Paris Agreement altogether, and the president is calling it a con job? That doesn't sound like the same direction as the rest of the world.
Well, look, the globe generally as a world economy has a direction of travel, and that was the comments that were made by the Chinese government today. And I think ultimately what we're seeing is that no single country will be able to do anything themselves. This needs to be a global effort, either to remain committed to this net zero target or to take a different course. And each individual country will make their decisions as to what's best for them. What we're seeing here in Australia is that energy policy under this Labor government is all pain and no gain, because prices are going up and the emissions reductions have flatlined.
Jerome, I'm going to guess you would like to rebut that.
Oh, look, I'm not going to take any criticisms on climate policy from the coalition. Like, they don't have any. They're tearing themselves apart on it. What we've done is work with experts and the Independent Climate Change Authority. We've accepted their advice. They've given us achievable and ambitious targets. I'm about halfway through their 1,000 pages that they put out last week. Cameron, I suggest you read it, because it's got all the detail that's needed and why we actually need to reduce emissions. Australia, we know, will be more impacted than others in the world if global warming increases by 2 degrees, and we need to be part of a push to reduce emissions. We've taken that to 2 elections, and the coalition are all over the shop on this, all over the shop.
Cameron, can I ask you, because this comes up a lot, the question of, can the coalition be credible on climate change when it's still figuring out what its policy is? When would you like the coalition to settle on a policy? Do you think that's something that should happen sooner, or something that you should wait and let Dan Tehan see out the process and the review that is underway? There seems to be a bit of division about that. What do you think about coming to a conclusion about policy?
Well, the first thing, just to put Jerome's mind at ease, is I have done my homework and had a look at the report last week, and it's based on some pretty heroic assumptions, I've got to say, and there's some big assumptions there around the fact that we might even get close to the 2030 target to start with. So, in relation to the coalition's policy, I think it's more than fair that we were able to see what this interim target was from the Labor government, and we will respond. I hope it's sooner rather than later, because a vacuum of policy is never a good thing, and we actually have a good story to tell about emissions reductions that were made whilst we were in government, which ultimately have been far better than what this Labor government have delivered over the last 3 years. And I think we need to get back to having the economic discussion, and one that is something that the Australian people can relate to, around affordability and reliability of the energy network.
Can I ask, one of your colleagues, Andrew Hastie's been quite outspoken on a number of these policy issues. Again, that seems to be causing a bit of division as to whether that's helpful or a hindrance to the Liberal Party. Is he being helpful by pushing for a bolder policy position, I think is how he described it himself this morning?
Well, look, I think the fact that Andrew's comments are receiving some traction out there in the community shows that these are topics that people want to have the discussion about. They want to have the debate, and it's fair enough that Andrew's out there calling on this Labor government to respond in relation to things like migration, things like climate and energy policy, because these are the debates that we need to have to make sure that Australia is a strong an independent nation into the future, and that we as an opposition have a policy suite moving into the next election that is credible and that people can see is worth backing in.
Jerome, Andrew Hastie is saying that he wants to connect with centre-right voters that are in seats like yours, seats that the Liberal Party used to win. How do you think his points around climate policy, around immigration, are received amongst your constituents?
Well, you just need to look at the electoral results here in Bennelong to see how, the coalition's climate and nuclear policy were received, how Mr Dutton's sort of threats to migration and immigration and going to that bottom drawer every time and blaming migration for every problem under the sun, they're not received well in Bennelong, and you just need to look at results across the country to see what Australians think about the Liberals' climate and energy policies. The reason why Mr Hastie's comments are receiving such attention because they seem to be totally at odds with where modern Australia is. Modern Australia wants their government to reach net zero by 2050 at an absolute minimum. Modern Australia is a diverse community that is accepting of migration and people from all over the world. So I think that's why Mr Hastie's comments are getting attention that they're getting. And again, it shows that the Liberal Party cannot have a settled policy, and they're more interested in themselves instead of formulating policy positions.
I think we could probably go on for this for a while, but I'll have to call it there because we'll run out of time. So Jerome Laxale, thank you very much. And Cameron Caldwell, I'm sure you'd love to get one more comment in, but we'll just have to have you come back on another time. Thanks for joining us too.
Thanks, Melissa.
There you are.